Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you. Tonight, I've got 3 true reports and stories to share that were sent in by viewers who all had strange and unsettling encounters with unidentified cryptids and Bigfoot-like creatures. And then, just to wrap things up, I found an interesting article in a newspaper dating all the way back to 1958 that I think you will all find as interesting as I did. It's going to be a weird one. So now grab your boots because, well, it's time to ride to Cryptid Country. To start things off this evening, I received this email from a man who recalls seeing an unsettling humanoid near Harper's Ferry, West Virginia as a teenager. He writes,
Hey Biker, I live in Jefferson County, West Virginia near Harper's Ferry. When I was a teenager back in high school, we used to throw these parties on top of a mountain, a big clearing in the woods. Let's skip all the juicy details and get straight down to it. There were about 12 to 15 of us there one night, with a good-sized bonfire, with our vehicles parked around it, sort of forming a semicircle. My friend and I were just sitting in his car when it all happened. Now, before I get into it, I want you to understand that we were all about 16 to 18 years old. Your typical young and dumb West Virginia teenager type stuff. So not to be too specific, I was in the passenger seat, and my friend was in the driver's seat. So he just happened to look up, and something caught his eye in the tree line that was in front of us, past the bonfire, about 15 to 20 feet out. I was looking down at the time when I heard him say, "Dude, what is that?" So I looked up and I was like, "Where? I don't see anything." He pointed it out to me, and instantly I could make out a silhouette of, well, something unnatural. It was dark, but it stood out from the light provided by the fire. I replied back, "What is that?" So he flipped on his car headlights. I still remember this thing very vividly. It appeared to be at least 8 feet tall, humanoid, and very, very skinny, as I could see the bone structure, with skinny long legs and long arms. I couldn't see its eyes. It's like they were sunk in and covered in grayish, ash-colored skin. When I locked eyes on this thing, I felt a sense of fear that, well, I've never felt before, and still to this day haven't felt. I honestly was completely speechless. My friend somehow rolled down his window and alerted everyone that it was there. All you heard were girls screaming and kids scattering. Everyone booked it back to their vehicle and started peeling out. This thing never moved. It just stood there the whole time. Like I said before, we generally don't get scared. Most of us were armed, but not a single person there wanted any part of this thing. At school, we told the stories, and we nicknamed it the stickman. I did some research on it, Googled its description, and came to the conclusion that what we saw was similar to a wendigo. I was actually in total shock when looking at drawn pictures of wendigos online because a few of them closely resemble the thing we saw. Also, I had never even heard the word wendigo before this happened. Signed, Sammy.
Thanks, Sammy, for sharing that. If it's any consolation, I'm doubtful it was a wendigo. I think that most likely it was a creature similar to a crawler humanoid or something like it, although I'm not sure if that's of any comfort. And now, some campers in eastern Montana, well, they encounter a very strange-looking Bigfoot.
Dear Tattooed Biker, back in the 1980s, my cousin was on a camping trip in eastern Montana with his wife. It wasn't a busy day for camping, and according to him, the ranger had told them that they were the only ones camping there that night. Anyways, so it's getting late, and my cousin said that he spots something across the lake. He thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, so he grabbed his binoculars. After focusing in on the creature, he said that it wasn't a bear because, well, it had a face that looked like a 70-year-old man, and the fur was longer than a bear would have. He thought maybe it was just someone in a suit. It suddenly looked around, like it sensed it was being observed, and then quickly disappeared into the tree line, whatever it was. He was completely spooked and wanted to leave the park immediately. His wife thought he was just being ridiculous and having an overactive imagination. They had brought along a shotgun, and she insisted they'd be fine if anything happened. Anyways, so that night everything is okay until my cousin is awakened by footsteps. His wife was still asleep, but he didn't want to wake her. He just tries to keep still and as quiet as possible. A figure, making heavy footsteps, approached the tent. My cousin said he was positioned so that his head was on the corner of said tent. Then this figure leans down and gently presses its hands around the corner of the tent, basically putting its hands around my cousin's head. I don't remember how long he said that this lasted, but whatever it was eventually left. He said that he smelled something like mechanical things, like someone working on a car, like gas, grease, and oil, although he had never heard a car. The next morning, everything at the campsite remained untouched. No problems at all. He didn't mention anything about finding any footprints. There wasn't any evidence at all that someone had ever been there. He eventually went and researched the area and discovered that their camping spot is supposedly a hot spot for Bigfoot and such. He now firmly believes that he saw some kind of Sasquatch, and, well, I'm not sure if I believe him. If anything, I always thought it was just a person messing with him. I'm just telling you the story he told me, and not adding to it or making anything up. Signed, Nate.
Wow, an absolutely chilling account. Big thanks to Nate for sharing that with us. Now, I, for one, believe this story, and I don't think it was someone just playing a prank, nor do I believe it was a bear. This area has a long history of Bigfoot or wildman sightings. And next, an apparent white Bigfoot is seen near a family cabin down in Kentucky.
Hello, biker. When I was little, my family owned a cabin on a lake in rural Appalachian, Kentucky. It was a pretty remote place at the time, though it's been more heavily developed over the last 10 years. Anyways, when we would go to the cabin, we would often go for picnics in a huge field at the edge of a farmer's field. One day, we set up our picnic spot at the very edge of a steep hill. At the bottom of that hill, the field met the tree line of a very large forest. I was too young to remember everything that happened, but this is what I was told by my sister and my parents. While we were sitting there on the field eating, my dad heard a really loud banging coming from the bottom of the hill where the tree line meets the field. He walked over to the crest of the hill, and he sees this enormous white creature standing there on 2 feet, taking these big sticks and throwing them over its head to bang off the tree trunks that was making the loud noise. He showed my mom, and she saw it too, and then we decided to instantly pack up and leave. Now, my parents are very sane and rational people, so they never really talked about it out of fear of sounding insane. No one really wants to claim that they saw a Bigfoot. Well, about 4 years ago, we were all having Christmas with my aunt and her family, who would also frequent a cabin on the same lake. We ended up talking about the cabin and were just sharing memories, when my aunt said that she had an absolutely unbelievable story that, well, she had never shared with anyone besides my uncle. She said that she would always make wild blackberry jam in the fall, so she would often go picking for wild blackberries. One day she said that she thought she saw a bear in the distance, eating blackberries, and that it scared the hell out of her, but she continued to pick, keeping an eye on it for a while. Well, eventually, this thing that she thought was a bear stood up on 2 legs, revealing its white coat of hair, and walked away on 2 legs into the woods. Obviously, we immediately shared our story, and everyone was in awe that we had seen the same thing, and around the same time, being the late 1980s. I decided to do a little research, and it turns out there were a ton of sightings around that time. And someone was so actually convinced that what he saw was a Bigfoot that he dedicated the rest of his life to trying to find it again. There are numerous reports of people seeing this thing around the same time that my family saw it. Now, I'm not sure if I really believe that this guy found the Bigfoot again, but he claims that he found 3 of them together, 2 big and brown, and 1 with thick white fur. an exact description of what my parents and aunt claimed that they had seen. Now, I don't really know what to think. The rational part of me knows that it probably wasn't Bigfoot, but I respect everyone in my family's sanity and intellect. And I'm convinced that what they saw wasn't a bear and was covered in thick white fur and walked on two legs. And, well, I just don't know how you can explain that away. Signed, Will.
Thanks to Will for sharing this account. Understandably, he refused to give the exact location of the county or the cabin, since other members of the family still frequent it. But regardless of specifics, Kentucky does sit right up against the Blue Ridge Mountain Range, like Arkansas and Alabama, two states that have a long history of white Bigfoot-like cryptid creature sightings going back over 100 years. Now, while doing some research on the background of an area for another case, I actually ran across something really interesting, and I wanted to share it with you guys. The following is directly from an article that was published in the Greenville News in Greenville, South Carolina, way back on November 10th, 1958. It details an incident from Riverside, California, where a funny thing happened to Charlie Wetzel on his way home one Saturday night. A monster jumped out at him. At least that's what he told authorities who investigated the incredible story. You see, Wetzel, 24, was a resident of nearby Bloomington, and he reported soberly that he was driving on a street near Riverside when a frightening creature jumped out in front of his car, and he describes the incident as such.
Wetzel said, quote, "It had a round, scarecrowish head, like something out of Halloween. It wasn't human. It had longer arms than anything I'd ever seen. When it saw me in the car, it reached all the way back to the windshield and began clawing at me. It didn't have any ears, and the face was all round. The eyes were shining like something fluorescent, and it had a wide mouth full of sharp teeth. And its skin, well, its skin was scaly, almost like small leaves."
Now Wetzel, he became terrified when the creature reached over the hood of his car and began clawing at his windshield. He said he then reached for a .22 caliber pistol that he kept in the glove box of the vehicle.
He said, quote, "I held that pistol and stomped on the gas. The thing fell back from the car and it gurgled. The noise it made, well, it didn't sound human. I think I hit it. I heard something hit the pan under the car."
Sheriff's officer said that Wetzel had pointed at some thin, sweeping marks that he said that the creature made on his windshield. They went to the scene of the claimed incident, but said that they couldn't find anything to either prove or disprove Wetzel's story. Now, the scene is at a point on North Main Street where it dips and crosses the Santa Ana riverbed, which is usually almost dry. Wetzel said that when he told the story to his wife, she induced him to phone the authorities. He was resistant to this at first because he kept saying that no one would ever believe a story like this. Sheriff Sergeant E.R. Holmes said that he thought perhaps a large vulture might have flopped on the hood of Wetzel's car. He said, quote, "Sometimes cars hit them when they're in the road eating rabbits that the cars have killed," end quote. So he searched the area himself on a Sunday. But after he was done, he said, "I didn't find a single feather." And there it is, all the true cryptid encounters and reports that I have for you this evening. So what did you think about these? I'm anxious to read all your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have a strange encounter or an unexplained experience that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description. Well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks again for taking this weird ride through cryptid country with this old biker tonight. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.